We use React, but it literally doesn't matter at all. You can use whatever you want. And so this particular library is kind of a response to this problem that I started seeing in the development of components, which is what I call the rolling eyes face pattern, where you have your component in JavaScript, and then kind of alongside of that, you have your component in, you have your CSS component, and then like this abstraction of these two things together is your component in your application. You see this in a lot of modern code. This is kind of like the contemporary way to write components. Even the brand new WordPress, which was open sourced with all of these beautiful React components, writes components in this way. But for me, I don't really love this pattern, and I ask myself, like, aren't components the abstraction that we were after all along, right? Like, why have these two arbitrarily separate classes for what essentially is just this one concept that I want to use. So I don't like this. I really just want to have a thing.jsx, and that has all of my opinions about how this thing is styled or whatever in my application. But there's two problems with that. The first problem is that you can't inline styled media queries. So if you have the style attribute on your component, you can't just like put in like media queries and breakpoints into that thing. And the second problem is, well, actually there is no second problem. There's just the one problem. So I think that this can easily be solved with these micro class selectors. And there are a bunch of libraries that do that. I'm going to give you a quick example of what that looks like in practice. So we have this amazing, beautiful example of code. It is 5 divs, 4 of which are in another one. And so that might render something like this. And so I could use this little class d-f to say that I want this to be I want the container to be a flux container, right? And I'll just put that on that outer div. So that's shorthand for display flex. I have another shorthand, so f_1. The underscore signifies that I want this to apply to all the child elements. And so that, man, I'm way too drunk to be talking. And so anyway, so that says, hey, like all the children elements, you're like flex1 now. And then I can do these, use the @ symbol to make these media queries, and these all just get added onto the class attribute. I don't have to write CSS for this. This is beautiful. Say flex direction column, but then flex direction row on like a media breakpoint or a medium breakpoint. That's super awesome. Then I can take this a little step further and say I want a little padding on all of the regular, whatever. You get the point. So the cool thing about this is it allows you to defer design, right? Like you don't have to actually like approach your stuff and be like, hey, this is like this design that I have for it. You can kind of incrementally add it without knowing where you're going. You style without actually having to jump into a CSS file, which is beautiful. You just work in the one file. That's awesome. It's server rendered friendly. That might be a problem that you're familiar with if you're writing React components. It has this like a nice inline workflow. So why is this so special? There's other libraries like tachyons and gravitons that do the same thing. I am partial to it because it has these like guessable names. So it has this very direct kind of like if you have a class or if you have a property that looks like this, it's going to like dehydrate very cleanly into this class selector, which means that you can kind of guess what it's supposed to be. It's also whatever first, so I'm not like dogmatic about like being mobile first. So anyway, there's these different matchers. They're awesome. They're actually not implemented in the GitHub repo yet, but anyway, that's it. Fantastic, Minions.